Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Richa Agarwal, CEO of Imami Art and Kolkata Center for Creativity. This is the second sessions of talks that we are having. So, Imami Art Talks 1.2, and we're really very excited. Every, I think, along with sharing as individuals, we've all learned so much. With each talk, we've grown individually. I think understanding the practice more, and I can the urgency to know more is kind of, it's just overtaking every other thought just now. And I think we launched this whole series of webinars keeping in mind practices which we could really not get to or understand, or people who are not so available to us, where we could get them all to the city, to Calcutta, and hear them. So this is reaching out to a much larger audience, very meaningful for all of us. And I'd like to thank Ushmita for moderating all these talks for us. Thank you, Ushmita. And I'll ask you to take the evening forward for us. Thank you, Shakuntala ji.
Thank you, Richa. As you so rightly said, that what started as a conversation between us has now, I think, become something we both are very passionate about and are quite committed to seeing this through a longer, sustained involvement. Welcome, Shakuntala. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. And without any more ado, I'll read your bio and then we can go on to talking about your work. Today we have with us Shakuntala Kulkarni, who has since the mid-80s been involved in a work which shifted from human predicament to gender-specific issues. Her work since then has been an inquiry into the lives of urban women and their spaces like home, work, cultural and social space, which is essentially patriarchal. Shakuntala began her career showing watercolors with Gallery Kemalt, Mumbai in 1985 and 88. In 1994-95, she began working on large-scale projects, the first being Beyond Proscenium, a multidisciplinary collaborative installation with theatre personalities, poets, musicians, dancers at Jahangir Art Gallery and Gallery Kemalt Mumbai and Art Heritage New Delhi. In 2002-2001, her Reduced Spaces, a video installation with a walk-in sculpture, along with a collaborative performance with a dancer choreographer, Arundhati Chattopadhyay, at Jahangir Art Gallery and Gallery Kemalt Mumbai, Gallery Sumukha in Bangalore, and APJ Multimedia Gallery in New Delhi. In 2007, she exhibited And When She Roared, the Universe Quaked, consisting of a multimedia installation with paintings and videos at Kemalt Prescott Road, Mumbai. Of Bodies, Armors and Cages was exhibited in 2012 at Kemalt Prescott Road, Mumbai, the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, New Delhi, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya, Mumbai. Her most recent body of work, titled Julus and Other Stories, was exhibited at Kemalt Prescott Road, Mumbai in 2018. Shakuntala Kulkarni's Of Bodies, Armor and Cages were part of the Indian Pavilion, Our Time for a Future Caring, curated by Rubina Karode at the 5th International Art Exhibition in Venice. Her works are in several public and private collections like Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, New Delhi, the Kunst Depot, Goshnan, Switzerland. The artist lives and works in Mumbai. Welcome, Shakuntala. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'll start with the share screen first, and then we can
thank you and Richa and Imami Arts, please, and the viewers for coming here and giving their time. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also like to remind our viewers that please don't forget to write in your questions in the chat box. We will accommodate as many as possible at the end of our session. And to our viewers watching on Facebook Live, please do write in your questions and we will try and ask those as well. Yes. Can you see the PPT now?
Yeah.
Okay, Shakuntala, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, sorry. So, you are so well known for your feminist and performative photographic works. But to understand your beginning point of your artistic journey, we start today's conversation with your early watercolors of women within a confined indoor setting. Could you talk a little about your early concerns and its evolution?
Yeah. I started with abstract paintings, and my concerns were very much a formal level, like form and uh, uh, space, which is still there, very much there. And I'm quite obsessed by form and space. But I must say, before I speak about the watercolors, I must say that in the 70s, I had the opportunity of seeing different kinds of films, and I was also associated with theater groups, and I was exposed to seeing a wonderful theater at that time. Very exciting theater was happening. The entire form of the theater was shifting, the thematics were shifting, the way the sound, the light, the acting, everything was not the same what I saw as a small kid, and that was very exciting for me. And but the thematics of the literature, the films, and the theater that I saw is essentially at that point existential. Like so some I was doing abstracts at that time, this existentialism just grew, and I was thinking about people around me, the predicament, and talking to people, discussing with them. And once when I went to Midnapur district with the help of Badal Charkar, and I met a particular person who was working in and supporting and empowering the villagers of that particular small remote village through theater. And it was so touching because that village was extremely poor and open to the Sundarban tigers and floods and like deaths, and the way he was empowering them, I said, I want to do something, and he said I should do posters for them, and that's how I started drawing again. So that is the starting point of my this journey. And I started doing human figures came into my work, where I talk about human predicament. That's what you see here. The colors are very subdued, almost black and white kind of thing, very still forms, very closed forms. They create a kind of a tension, as if you're, like questioning, looking at the viewers. They stand still, some of them. And there are indoor spaces where there is hardly any movement, and there's an outdoor space. So already the indoor and the outdoor space had started coming up in my works. Yes.
No, this is very interesting what you said about your involvement with theater. Especially in our conversations, you have mentioned that your family has a history of theater and dance, and that you particularly were very influenced by Badal Sarkar, who became a very a personal friend, and Satyadev Dubey, and you also worked with Aniket Theatre Group. And as you just mentioned, it was an exciting time for theater. I'm especially interested to understand if Badal Sarkar's philosophy of the third theater, where he comes out of the proscenium, where he brings theater into the spectator, surrounded by the spectator, breaking down those earlier walls. Is that in a way something that influences your breakaway work beyond proscenium?
Yes, my entire family is been in theater and films. Like my mother was acted in theater. She was also a singer, and my sisters, of course, both the sisters, my older and the younger one, were in theater and films. So since my childhood, I grew up in a kind of a multi-disciplinary atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so it was very natural for me to shift my form and space later, which I'll talk about it as we go on. But it was not just Badal Sarkar. I met him much later. It was Satyadev Dubey also. You know, like who whenever somebody was not well, he would take me. Once, twice he has taken me, but then how to deal with the space of the inside theater, or how to stand, how to speak, or sound, everything. Actually, he used to speak to me at that point. But what really influenced is, you know, I was part of Aniket, that group, and my sister was a founder member. I tagged along with her everywhere for all the rehearsals, and whether she liked it or not. And the real impression that was made was a play called Gochi. That was my first play, which was that intimate theater, where I saw that the whole form which I knew about theater was not there. It was very different. There were no stage. People, the viewers and the actors mingled. The sound was created sitting within the viewers, and there was no distance between the viewer and the.
But to just cut in here, Aniket is Amol Palekar's theatre group, if I'm not mistaken.
It's not his theatre group. There were
But
many.
he was many people.
He
But
was
I
a
have,
part of it. Yes.
okay.
So
But I
was
have
this-
read that there was a great influence of Badal Sarkar's, third
Yeah.
theatre.
So when I
Karnataka.
went to Calcutta a little later, and I saw Badal Sarkar's plays. So that was also huge. I had an opportunity to sit with him, talk to him, and that total theater. See, what was interesting in this intimate theater was that it was now what we call it site specific, you know. Those days I don't know if they called it that. Like it would take place on a terrace, in the garden, in the living room, anywhere. So the exits and the entries were not pre-planned. It was right there. And also the way the sounds were made was not with those huge musical instruments. Sometimes we took sticks, sometimes we took whatever that was available, you know, and lighting was also different. So this entire space was used. So
Right.
that, of course, was in 70s. It was much later, after 20 years, literally, that this memory of this history of intimate theater and the memory of that, my experiences just came up. And when my work became more and more uh, uh, gender specific, at that time, in intimate theater, the theater itself, and especially intimate theater, the memories of that, the experience of that came up, and I thought I would be able to play with the form and the space around that. But before that, Ushmita, I also want to tell you that you know, I was born. I grew up in a family which was very open and free. So there was no gender discrimination that I knew about. It was only in college and later. And when I got married, I became even more aware, not because my family was bad or something. It's just that you become aware of certain things.
Right.
And personal shares and experience and other people sharing with me, you know, I started observing, reading about it, researching about it, and I realized that the women's spaces were pretty violated. You know, their personal, the domestic, their personal ones, and the public spaces were violated, and there was a lot of despair or fear or frustration that the women were experiencing due to the restrictions that are put on them within this essentially this patriarchal society that one lived in. And that started thinking, and I thought it was so important at that time for me to really address these issues, which
Right.
I felt very important to address. And that is how my work shifted. But for that, I felt I needed to have a different language. I needed to expand my visual language, to stretch it, and so to blur and include different disciplines was important. And for me, it came naturally because of my past experience of theater and films. And so that's how theater came in. And it really helped me to break certain, play with the form and the space.
Right. So in Beyond Proscenium, if I understand correctly, apart from these paintings, which were also not paintings, but which were like you rightly kind of named them beyond proscenium. They came out of that, two-dimensional surface. So you also included performance and theatrical elements as part of the exhibition making, if I'm not wrong.
This Beyond Proscenium was the first project where the works came off the wall,
Hmm.
and the type of the spaces that got created were very theatrical, because I made small maquettes and I realized this was something different that was happening, and it required to be huge, not just tiny things. So when that happened, I realized that actually theater can happen on this. It was not so pre-planned initially, and the railings, the steps, the platforms, the backdrops, everything which were in my watercolors became actually real objects where you could sit on, you could hold on, you could lean on, and Vijayabai was in NCPA was looking at some experiments they wanted to do, and at that time when I showed my work to Vijayabai, who was the director at that time, she thought Chauraha was the initiative where we could do this, and theater people from theater, friends from theater came and did little skits. Then there was music created, there was dance created around this work. See, normally it's the other way around. They are used like props, but here I had already done the work, and theater, dance, music was created around this work, responding to the space and the imagery on the work.
Right.
So it was just the other way around.
Very
And
interesting. I mean, it reminds me of Badal Sarkar's quote, that the performers and the spectators come to the same place on the same day at the same time. Otherwise, the event of the theater will not happen. So it was kind of, I think, in a way, like you very rightly said, a site-specific uh, happening or a performance that happened along with these paintings, which were now objects.
yeah.
So going on to perhaps your, first breakaway kind of an installation in reduced spaces from 2001, you created this almost disruptive atmosphere in which your viewer had to negotiate to view the works. In that sense, the exhibition space becomes an extended proscenium, and the viewers also become, participants or actors.
Yes.
I have seen similar processes adopted in several works of yours, such as the 2007 and When She Wrote, The Universe Quaked. So can you reflect on this participatory process of seeing a work?
So this is again an extension of the same, my experience of intimate space where the viewers can participate. I mean, that's what I felt, that they should participate. See, I had done 5 or 6 films which talked about this project. This project is called Reduced Spaces, and when spaces are reduced, when they are sort of, there is a discomfort, there is a frustration, irritation dealing with that space. And we will be seeing one of the films, so you will be, people will get a clarity. But just to talk of this, I thought the viewer who enters this space also must experience that physically and emotionally. So I created this entire structure with bamboos. It's a sculpture actually in a way, and I allow the viewer to enter, but I give them hardly any freedom to move as they want. In fact, I control their movement, and they have to see the films through this scaffolding, which was very, very irritating for many people and uncomfortable because the bamboos came in the way. So what the protagonist was experiencing in the film or addressing in the film, I wanted the viewer to experience physically right there.
Right. So just coming on to one more, this is a much later work, but in this also you talk about that similar participatory, but you are allowing the people to see the work, but there is that discomfort So maybe you can talk a little about this as well before we go on to see your
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, so these works are tiny works made on acrylic and glass. And I was one thing very clear. I didn't want them on the wall. I either wanted them below the eye level or above the eye level. And I was struggling with this, and I struggle a lot. For me, presentation is very important. Just sitting and doing my work in the studio is one thing, but when I present, how do my viewers enter my space is very, very important. And I, and I, when I was in when I just didn't have an answer for this, but when I happened to go to Venice much before my show with my daughter, and I saw her struggling looking at Tintoretto's work, which was on the ceiling, looking through the glass and just grumbling and just frustrated and upset. And I love that. And I said, exactly, this is what I want. And that's how, when I came back, I designed the ceiling and I put up the work. So people had to look at that first. Actually, it is also about negotiating with the space, because you see your face and then you twist and turn this mirror and then you see the work. And also about you being a viewer, and you're also an object, because others are looking at you doing this choreography, because the works were not in a straight line or something. So you keep turning and twisting, moving around, and the others are looking at you. So you are an object, sometimes you are a viewer. So this changing of the roles was also very interesting for me. And many people were excited. Many people were actually, I found some people lying on the floor and looking straight at the ceiling and going round and round. That was quite funny. But I found 2, 3 friends of mine getting really upset because their necks were hurting and they kept looking at their own faces. So all this was very important, how people went through different spaces looking at this work.
Yeah. So coming back to perhaps, one of your early videos, actually two of your early videos, which we will see one after the other. So this is Through the Door, and then we'll see Confinement. So both of these mark a new dimension, that of moving image. Earlier you move away from uh, the painted image or the photographed image into this moving image. And in our conversation, you told me that you were trying to portray incidences of violence from Gujarat riots, and that you craved the immediacy of the physical body and the moving image versus the painted or the drawn two-dimensional image. So can you reflect on this?
This is called, this particular the image that you're seeing is Through the Door. It's part of Reduced Spaces, the project, where I talk about, are you showing the film first or I talk about it?
No, you can talk about it.
Okay, so here I have used, I could have just done that performance, but I've used 3 women, 3 of us are running up and down, like we come out of that space into a space towards us, towards the viewer, and then the protagonist runs to the other space. Now that's all the action is. So here, the confined space, the light and the shadows, and the diagonal way in the protagonist runs. It's not horizontal, it's not vertical, but in a diagonal line. That's really important, and it's also looped, because it is an ongoing struggle of getting a space, which is getting a space where they're not threatened. So I've used close-up of the bodies. I've used the entire body movement to show this struggle, this upset, this anxiety. So this is the first time I did the film, actually. And but my sister, who's a filmmaker, Chitra, her entire team helped me shooting and everything. And Debuda, her cinematographer, who is one of the top cinematographers, he's no more now. He said he is going to do the shoot, and the type of the lighting he's done, the way I wanted it, is superb. And it spoke so much about tight space, the tension, the anxiety. Yes.
Yeah, it heightens, you know, anyway, the black and white
Yes,
imagery
yes.
and the
It's
top
very
light.
rare to really collaborate and a person really understands what you want, because I only did stick drawings. I didn't know how to speak about the film language. So I did drawings, I drew the lines, and I showed him this is the way I want. And he did exactly what I wanted. And that's my first experience.
I'm showing an excerpt from the film. So similarly, confinement, I
Yeah,
think.
so it goes on and on. You know, what I wanted to say about that previous film that we saw was the sound was just done with very simple instruments like do lakdi, the stone, and it was done by Neil Chattopadhyay, who was working in my sister's team, and by reverbing, reversing. So it was again very much experimental. I didn't know what the outcome would have been, but it created that kind of screechy sound which I wanted. This is confinement is about, you know, in 2000 when I heard about atrocities on women during Gujarat riots, I was really upset, quite very upset and angry that that such a thing should happen, and could really feel the anguish they must have gone through. And for a very long time it remained with me, this anguish, this fear, this anxiety, this despair. And I couldn't draw, I couldn't paint it. I knew it had to be, I was sure it had to be a moving image. And uh, and I hadn't done on my own anything like this, you know. So one day I just borrowed a high-8 camera. Of those days we used to have high-8 cameras for the weddings we used to use. I just brought that and I put it on a pile of books and I started it. And I closed my bedroom door and I did this performance with that one tube light that was on the top. So it's a very low tech thing. It is also low resolution. And there was a mistake there. I had turned something on where I miss out on one or two of, you know, like it is not smooth. Frames are missed out. And I did many times this, but the first time what I did said what I had to say. See, I'm not an actress. I can't keep on reproducing the, you know, these things, though I've participated, but I'm not an actress. So it's like, you know, you paint and then you want to correct it, but you'll only beautify it. But that first jam that comes is what you have already done with all your heart. And so I had to accept this. And it's quite fun also when my actions come first and the sound comes later. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, this film is also looped because it's very important, and because of the constraints of the time, we are not showing the next part. But she gets up again. She starts buying. She never gives up. So it's not about her being a victim. It's about her not giving up. This is about hope and despair, you know. And minimum lighting, the sound, everything adds to that struggle of trying to break open that confined space and being free. So,
So
and
now this series of works that you did, which are called the roles I would love to take, roles I would love to play, you take on, well-known image from Hindu mythology and you kind of subvert it to a feminine narrative. Do you think it's possible to reframe popular narratives to be, kind of contextual and create connections in the mind of the viewer between things or ideas that aren't typically associated with each other?
yeah, I mean, artists are free to really express themselves the way they want to and subvert whatever they want to. So I'll talk about this particular work. You know, my grandmother used to take me for kirtans, and she used to tell me stories of Rama and Mahabharat. So this Hanuman tearing his chest and saying, "Where is Ram?" When someone asks him, he says, "This Ram is here." So that story was very much with me, and there are many other stories, but this is also one of the stories which always was interesting for me. And so when I was doing this particular project, I remembered this story, and I thought, if I were to ask what kind of a woman you would love to be, or you would like to see, I thought I should tear my shirt and show the woman I'd like to see, or this is the type of the woman I would like to be. And this is where I was in this project. I was doing Aikido, Kyodo, which is archery, and archery talks about discipline, character, focus, the power. So I thought I should take that and put it inside. So there are two films. One is I am tearing the shirt, and one is shown inside. And also in this installation, I show the film outside. So it's like two films, and the bow breaks, but she puts it back again and doesn't give up and starts again holding it. So it's the way you stand, it's the way you hold your bow, your posture, everything is very important in archery. And I wanted to show that dignity, that power, that freedom, not giving up attitude.
But how did the viewers take it? Do you think, like I asked, do you think it's possible for every viewer to understand and to this kind of a like I said, it's a trans-conceptual imagery that you are taking something and then recontextualizing it.
Yeah, I mean, many viewers, obviously, this is a very known thing, like Hanuman tearing his shirt is, I think most of the kids would know this story, at least during my time. And many people who came and saw, some of them, I mean, they were amused to see how I was showing, subverting this whole thing. And but it makes a point. It talks about the gender issues which I want to talk about, the power, because I've shown women in different avatars. In this, I've shown a powerful woman. In some, in the same project, I've also shown people who are in a not victim situation, but wounded, hurt, in despair.
Yeah. So, I mean, going forward from
Sorry, I
there,
don't know if I've answered your question, but it's the viewers who have given me the feedback have responded to this whole tearing of the shirt. Me, the woman tearing the shirt and showing another powerful woman inside. So that's what I can say
right.
right now.
So going forward from there, within the context of this exhibition, you had done several works, uh, as for instance, this particular image of the video and the next video that we are going to see. You talk about victimization, violence, power games within the politics of gender. and you analyze it through the games that you played as a kid. For instance, the one that we're going to see uses kabaddi. So you use sports as a metaphor, as in the one where you're tearing the shirt and a woman with archery is seen. So maybe after we see the video, you can reflect on this.
Yep.
This is again an excerpt.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, these games we played so innocently. The blind man's buff, this kabaddi, or even trust game, or even tug of war, and that was a very different way of looking. So context is very decisive. You know, it's really important what context you come from. Here I'm showing this the not victimization, but the power games where you're consumed and you struggle to deal with that, you know, because here she's touching that line. Sometimes she's not touching that line, but she's not giving up. So throughout my work, it's not, she never gives. In my all my works, I will never give up. I will always see to it that I'll fight back. Or even if you know, like there is a sense of being consumed, I get up again. So this whole sense of not giving up is always there, and even it's here, you know. So, and yeah, I mean, I don't want to show women only as heroines or victims. I also want to show the in-between thing, that the entire process of dealing with these tools, you know. So the games talked about that power game and victimization, the despair, hope,
Right.
the struggle to deal with it.
Right.
That
So the next series of works that we see are, you know, from Bodies, Cages, and Armors, and we will end the presentation with Julus. And these two series do have similarity, but you also talk about the binaries of protection and entrapment within one, but you also say that it differs. This series differs from Julus, although both are rooted in this, you know, patriarchal ideologies and discourses that you have been discussing within your practice. So could you walk us through this particular series first?
yeah, I'll talk about of bodies, armor, and cages first. Okay, so they're all my size, so they're wearable costumes, and it's the starting point was when I have been reading about a lot of rapes that were happening. Actually, I was keeping a track of that for some time, and when I read about 6-month-old child raped, I think I said, this I have to address. And how do I address that, you know? And then the atrocities on women and their body especially was something which should not be tolerated. And how do we protect the female body? So actually, this notion of protection itself is a question. Like, do we really, if all this violence wasn't there, there was no need for this word called protection. But then we have these atrocities, we have the violence on the female body. So I created this structure, this wearable costume. Now, why cane can be twisted and when heated, and it has a beautiful chromatic feel, monochromatic feel. And when you join them, the joineries and the weave can create an obstruction for free viewing of the body. It obstructs the gaze. So that is how the structure was created. Now, I'm only going to talk about the images that you're showing because later on I can talk of other things. Yeah. Um, so when I initially created that, it was only as a metaphor to protect the female body, but the design, the mechanism of the work is such that you can't easily move when you wear it. You can't move your hands. There's no freedom to move around easily. So it is about looking at protecting the female body and as protection and the notion of being trapped. So this is how it all started. But when I was, and after that, this notion of protection went into the city, and that is photographs that you're seeing. This is Asiatic Library. Earlier was Juhu Beach, and before that was Shivaji Park. Now this has a story because this is where I got burned on my hair, the eyebrows, everything got burned because of the tar that it fell, and it is a very crowded area, and that is where the idea of protection came up actually. And I thought I should walk there. And when I walked there, sitting in my studio and saying that I'm going to walk there, and when you're actually walking, there's a huge difference. I was shaking like a leaf there, okay? And my entire team was with me and literally holding the hand and walking. But what I realized is wearing this costume was I felt safe when I wore that costume and walked because there were thousands of eyes, hundreds of eyes on me through the taxis, through the buses, through the windows and doors. Everybody was looking at me for that moment. There was pin drop silence for that moment. No horns, nothing. Traffic came to a halt when I was crossing. And that was an experience for me. And it was very unnerving, at the same time exciting. Because I at that moment became aware that here I'm talking of deflecting the gaze, but actually I'm also inviting the gaze because it's important to invite the gaze because only then an inquiry can happen. Because people came to me and my team and asked why this is happening. And then we could talk to them. And then that thought of protecting the female body, that thought, why they should protect, why they should take care of, respect the female body, if they can take it home to their workplace, I think that's enough to start with, right? It's like a drop in the ocean. So when I was wearing this in my studio, this is from Chemold, of course, exhibition. But when I was wearing my costumes day in and day out in front of the mirror, standing in front of the mirror, I started feeling that my body was being transformed. And there was a sense of balance, dignity. It was very different, though some part of my body was getting caught. And I thought there is a rhythm in walking. And I thought and I could even fold these costumes in a particular way. They looked like crabs and flowers on the floor. But when I wore them, they looked very different. They looked transformed. How do I show this to people? And that is how the performance took place. So most of my things, it was not pre-planned. This has been a most organic way of working this project because it just kept coming up. It was not pre-planned. As and when I was working. This is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya in Mumbai, where people actually, what was touching here was hundreds of people came and saw it. They looked at it. They may not have ever seen such things, but they were attracted towards it. So the attractive way of doing that was very important to draw the attention of the people, to make it magnificent, magical. It was very important for people to stop the people and, hey, hello, stop here and look at me, kind of. And this is where the carpenters who helped me, the electricians, they said, when they asked me and I was speaking to them about these works, they said, Ki, yes, we must respect and look at the female body in a very different way. I was really moved by that. So it's really important to show in public spaces.
Mm. So
Yes.
jumping from of Bodies, Armors and Cages of 2012 to Julus of 2018, like we said that these have similarities, but there's also a difference because you said that if the earlier series was about protection and entrapment, this was about celebrating the warrior within yourself. So maybe you could say a little
Yes.
bit about this.
The commonality is the cane material that I've used to a point, but also it, yeah, some of it, but there is a lot of difference. It is not full costume. There is freedom to walk, to move in these works. And in the previous one that you saw, I must also mention that, you know, I was quite, I love terracotta warriors. I've been quite infatuated by those terracotta warriors. And when I was thinking of a female warrior, those thoughts came back to me, those images came back to me, because terracotta warriors also sit and stand in a little awkward way, if you really see. And they don't have spears and things in their hands, swords. They're all broken. So I have these imaginary spears in my hand, the swords in my hand, and I've evolved actions which talk about the gallant, being brave, being fearless. You know what the warriors would talk about, the samurais would talk about. And also when I was observing 26th Jan parade, I saw that the head of battalion was throwing the sword, and the way they walk, that we will protect this country, we will protect our nation, we can do it. You know, that kind of a feel I got. So this is how I conceived this work, where we walk, we sit, and I tell the audience that yes, I can do it. I can really, I am the warrior, fearless, unstoppable, you know, that kind of person. And then they all stand together in solidarity. They talk about their dignity, they talk about freedom. They don't actually talk, it's the body language that is being used.
Mm.
Nobody talks here, there is only sound here.
Yeah. Before we go on to see the video,
Yeah,
maybe you know
this
what
is
struck.
just a little thing is that this is shown on 4 projections. You
Mm,
stand in the center in a
mm,
very confined space, and then you observe. The idea was to create that intimacy. Again, my intimate theater has come here, and also the scale of the protagonists in the film and the scale of the viewers are almost the same. So your body and the protagonist's body kind of relate to each other. So finally, when they walk
mm,
towards that goal, that you know, like of freedom, of self-respect,
mm.
of equality, that march, it is like you're standing in the center and engulfed by all these warriors, the female warriors, and then they invite you to walk with them. And then, you know, and you have then freedom to walk if you want to. And that is how I've conceived this work. And it is also uncomfortable, very uncomfortable to keep looking on all 4 sides.
Let me play the video and then.
Yeah, but the audience will have to imagine that it's on 4 walls.
And also, this is an excerpt. That's I'm stopping the share now so that we can address questions if there are. So before we go on to the question, from the audience, I had one query that in this particular last video that we see for Juloos, we do see, the background is again painterly, and you're bringing back your kind of painterly approaches to filmmaking, which was not there earlier. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. It took me a long time, about 6 months, to think, what do I want in the background? I didn't want a natural scenery. I did not want something with a skyline. I didn't want a flat surface. So I only knew that I didn't want this, I didn't want that, but I actually couldn't find the right thing. Now, one day, sitting in my studio, I spotted a small square which looked interesting. So I called my cameraman and I shot it and we expanded it. We did about 4, 5, and it looks very interesting. It looked like some Chinese paintings, and it did not talk about any specific geographical, any specific space. And I thought that'll work. So when I was doing compositing, we put it behind and we saw, and it worked. I had to do a little bit of Photoshop in that, but it is almost monochromatic. It doesn't come in the way of my actions, the movement, and it gives a lovely texture at the back. And it's my paint, it's my board. Actually, I work on my boards on the walls, and these are all the stains and overlappings and things on the board that over the years which is formed. That's what it is. But when they are magnified, they look like landscapes.
So we have a question from Mithu Sen. She asks, which female body you refer inside your cane semi-transparent costume, especially the one in which you are crossing the Indian road with onlookers' gaze? I see a westernized outfit with high heels. Do you like to represent any specific culture through your multi-layered presence of of a woman warrior?
Walking on the Shivaji Park Road, basically.
Yeah,
She's
that
referring
one.
to. Yeah, I had thought a lot about this. This does not talk about any Indian or foreign or it's any woman actually. And that is why very carefully I chose black color, because I did not want to use any specific color which would talk about a body in a specific way. So it is very open to for experiencing or discussing. It is not Indian, but I being Indian and my experience being here, um, from that experience, I have created whatever I've created. But that doesn't mean I'm not talking of other bodies, other female bodies. Doesn't get restricted to me or Indian body.
She says, Mithu again says, I did not mean the color only.
Yeah, that's fine. You mean the way I've dressed, but it is the costume. If she's talking about the costumes, Mithu, then it's all mixed and matched. It's sometimes a Roman head, it is Kathakali skirt, or it is a colonial dress. So it has no nationality at all in my.
Nandita Basak asks, why don't you use any male figure to perform?
There were three male performers when I did the live performance wearing this in Kiran Nadar Museum and in Chemold. Yes. But here I'm using my body, I'm the protagonist, and that's why. And also I didn't want to show variety of that kind. It is not about different kinds of people and different kinds. The very fact that I'm using 11 costumes, 11 types of costume itself talks about um, different people. It's not the same. There are different groups of people. So I wanted to show that variety, but not through male and female and in that sense. I'm talking. This is gender specific, and I was talking of the female body.
Right. Arpita Akhanda asks on Facebook, we saw you bringing in few understanding / language of theater in your video installation and performances. Could you talk about the relation and contrast between the two through your practice? And she also asks about the designs of your costumes, whether there is any specific reference point or are they your own designs?
Okay. So the first question, please, can you repeat?
Yeah. We saw you bringing in few understanding language / language of theater in your video installation and performances. Could you talk about the relation and contrast between the two through your practice?
The performances, the relationship of the performances to my practice.
Yeah, of theater, language of theater in your video
Yes.
installation.
So it's, I'm not talking, when one talks of theater, one talks of many times acting, but it is not about acting I'm talking about. I'm talking of the form and the space of the intimate theater, which I was completely enchanted with, because it had flexibility, it had surprises, it had discovery, there's all of that, because it was never pre-planned. It was site specific. And it was also, it depends on who the audience is, and according to that a lot of things took place, moving, and this whole relationship, it was more about relationship and participation of the viewer and the actor. So it's not about acting, it is that aspect I was drawn to, and I brought that in my works, and I have said that in different ways.
Right. So Vijay Raghavan Srinivasan asks, most of your artwork connecting public space to private space and strongly connected with socio-political context. How did you find the uniqueness throughout the body of artworks?
Well, I don't know how to answer this question. How do I find the uniqueness?
Yeah, that's what he asks.
I'm sorry, Raghavan. I can't. I don't think I can really do justice to this question.
Maybe you could just talk about how you go about looking for your own voice rather than
I mean,
addressing.
it is more about my own experiences. It is about what I read, what I see. It is about shared experiences that make me think, and then certain situations that I experience or others experience. So it's through all this. It's not just one thing. It's about, yeah, it all gels together. The histories, the memory, uh, all of that together just sudden, it just gels at one point. It's not so pre-planned at times.
So Prashant Salvi asks, can you tell us about your work on Godri? But we haven't really shown that
Yeah.
work, but if you want to
Maybe
discuss it.
we can, Sushant, talk about it some other time, because I haven't shown it, but it is also part of this, talking about women and different spaces, about the gaze, about defying the gaze. So it has been the similar, but I used little pieces of a cloth on which I've drawn, and then a domestic helper, worker, has helped me to stitch this godri. So these little stitches over my work. Again, literally chopping my works. So the talking about the women and their spaces, which are so distorted and chopped, and so it's subtle, but that's what I wanted. And also women make these godris. It comes from grandmother to mother to the daughter, and my grandmother made godri. So to me, godri is very important. When my kids were born, we were wrapping the kids in the godri. So for me, godri is very important. So that is how it just came about. It's very close to women.
So I think that wraps up our session for today. Richa, can you come back online? Then, yeah.
What a wonderful session. It's been so interesting. And as usual, like at most of the sessions, I sit down and make my notes for questions later, or pointers, or possibilities of doing things together. Thank you so much for being a part of Imami Art Talks and taking us through this wonderful journey. and translation of your own art, which really becomes a lot more meaningful hearing it from you directly.
Thank you, Shakuntala. It was really wonderful. We've been having several chats for the last few weeks and today as well. So it's been really a positive response all around. I'm sure the viewers take back a lot from what they have just seen and heard you talk about. You talk about really serious issues of women's emancipation. So that is something very important that we believe in.
Thank you,
Uh,
Shweta.
okay, there's one more. Just a second. Arundhati Chattopadhyay says, Shakuntala's works are very unique and exciting. The spaces are important. Is she the dancer that you collaborated with?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Arundhati. Uh, yeah.
She lives
So,
in Goa.
right. So, to our viewers, I would remind you that tomorrow, do join us around the same time for a session with Pushpamala N. And it has been a good run. And tomorrow, the Conversations 1.2 will come to a conclusion, but we will be back with more programs quite soon. So have a very good evening. Thank
Thank
you
you,
again,
Shweta.
Shakuntala.